But it was Watergate that transformed everything. But then an event happened that made it clear that despite their heroic confidence, the journalists didn't know everything. But there was one final step in this transformation of journalism. But in reality, it's something very different. But this time, it's not the politicians, it's us, the audience that they've turned to. But actually, the money they raised may have had its own corrupting and destructive effects in Africa. But this wasn't reported because it was too complicated. And it wouldn't have made us feel good about ourselves. But reporters still needed a grand, simple story about the world, into which all the chaotic events and fragments of stuff that happen every day could be fitted. But this simple battle between good and evil couldn't last. And it finally cracked back where it first began, in Africa. But they soon discovered that many of them weren't innocent at all. They were the evil Hutus who had killed millions of the Tutsis. But instead of behaving like good victims, they too carried out terrible massacres. But he refused to bow down to the pressure because he was an elitist. But then, Richard Nixon came to power in America. But in 1972, they got caught bugging the Democrats in the Watergate building. But he was exposed by the Washington Post. But then, the journalists began to uncover the strangest thing. They found corruption in the heart of the elites who ran their country. But secretly, they were running things in their own interests. But then, in the 1990s, the journalists became even more like Richard Nixon. Like him, they started to see hidden enemies everywhere. But now, the news and television programs have ended up taking serious threats to society and exaggerating and distorting them. But there is one difference between us and Richard Nixon. He told his psychiatrist that when he looked in the mirror in the morning, there was no one there. When we look in the mirror in the morning, we think we're too fat. But what this film is going to suggest is that that defeatist response has become a central part of a new system of political control. But he has done it in a very new way. But the key thing was that Surkov then let it be known that this was what he was doing, but to use the conflict to create a constant state of destabilized perception in order to manage and control. But maybe we have something similar emerging here in Britain, but it's an odd, non-linear world that plays into the hands of those in power. But nobody seems to know whether it was a victory or whether it was a defeat. But then his enemies turn out to be even more evil than him. But the real epicenter of this non-linear world is the economy. But at the same time, wages are going down. But then it's revealed that the deficit is going up. But the dark heart of this shape-shifting world is quantitative easing. But it gets even more confusing, because the Bank of England have admitted that those billions of pounds have not gone where they are supposed to, but nobody seems to know. But that's what they want you to say. But you will never be able to afford to live in them. But now, the algorithms are so strong and know so much about you that they only give you what they know you like, where all you see and hear is you. But maybe it is a fake job. Your real job is shopping. But as you sit in the glass-walled offices, you know that the targets are manipulated and fake, but you all sit there and pretend it is objective and rational. But then the politics fell away, and now you are just left detached. But they are helpless in the face of the refugee crisis. But maybe they aren't really politicians any longer, but really, we are just components in their system. But by the 1970s, the system was starting to crack. But everybody had to play along and pretend that it was real, because no one could imagine any alternative.